Master Classic Stories 1. The Kabulliwala by Rabindranath Tagore. Now we are doing this series in which we will be doing the full story slowly, word by word, so that anybody can understand. And then the next video will be doing a vocabulary study with lots of real life examples. So for every story, we'll have 2 videos. This is the first video in which I'll read out the whole story, and it's a very beautiful story. The Kabulliwala. My 5-year-old daughter, Minnie, M-I-N-I, Minnie, cannot live without chattering. C-H-A-T-T-E-R-I-N-G, chattering. Chattering means talking non-stop. My 5-year-old daughter, Minnie, cannot live without chattering. I really believe that in all her life, she has not wasted a minute in silence. She has not wasted a minute in silence. Her mother is often vexed. V-E-X-E-D. Her mother is often vexed at this and would stop her prattle, P-R-A-T-T-L-E, but I would not. Her mother is often vexed, which means tired, really tired out, frustrated, and would stop. Her mother is often vexed at this and would stop her prattle. Prattle means talking non-stop. But I would not. To see Minnie quiet is unnatural. And I cannot bear it long. B-E-A-R, bear. Bear means you have to handle the stress. Bear it long. And so my own talk with her is always lively. One morning, for instance, when I was in the midst of the 17th chapter of my new novel, so he's a novelist, in the midst means M-I-D-S-T, midst means middle of the 17th chapter of my novel, my little Minnie stole into the room and, putting her hand into mine, said, "Father, Ramdayal, the doorkeeper, calls a crow, K-R-O-W. He doesn't know anything, does he?" Before I could explain to her the differences of language in the world, she was embarked, E-M-B-A-R-K-E-D, she was embarked on the full tide of another subject. So you can see, embarked on the full tide. One more wave, tide is wave. Embarked means started a journey. So he has used the words this way. Before I could explain to her the differences of language in this world, she was embarked on the full tide of another subject. "What do you think, father? Bhola says there is an elephant in the clouds, blowing water out of his trunk, and that is why it rains." And then, darting off means running off ennui, while I sat still making ready some reply to this last saying, she said, "Father, what relation is mother to you?" With a grave face, grave means serious, G-R-A-V-E, I contrived, C-O-N-T-R-I-V-E-D, I contrived to say, "Go and play with Bhola, Minnie, I'm busy." Contrived means made up. Contriving is making up. The window of my room overlooks the road. The window of my room overlooks the road. Overlooks means you can see outside. Overlooks the road. The child had seated herself at my feet near my table and was playing softly, drumming on her knees. I was hard at work, which means I was working hard. On my 17th chapter, where Pratap Singh, the hero, had just caught Kanchan Lata, the heroine, in his arms and was about to escape with her by the 3rd story window of the castle, C-A-S-T-L-E, castle, the palace, when all of a sudden Minnie left her play and ran to the window crying, "A Kabulliwala! A Kabulliwala!" Kabulliwala is a peddler who comes and sells things, sweets and all that. Sure enough, in the street below was a Kabulliwala, passing slowly along. He wore the loose, soiled, S-O-I-L-E-D, soiled clothing of his people. With a tall turban, there was a bag on his back, and he carried boxes of grapes in his hand. I cannot tell what were my daughter's feelings at the sight of this man, but she began to call loudly, "Ah!" I thought, "He will come in and my 17th chapter will never be finished." At which exact moment, the Kabulliwala turned and looked up at the child. When she saw this, overcome by terror. Overcome means you cannot control it. Something overcomes you means you cannot control it. It's out of your control. Overcome by terror, she fled. Flee, fled. Fled. Fled means ran away, escaped to her mother's protection and disappeared. She had a blind belief that inside the bag which the big man carried, there were perhaps 2 or 3 other children like herself. She thought that. The peddler, meanwhile, peddler, P-E-D-L-A-R, the person who goes on the streets and sells things like sweets. The peddler, meanwhile, entered my doorway and greeted me with a smiling face. So precarious was the position of my hero and my heroine. Precarious means at the edge. Precarious, P-R-E-C-A-R-I-O-U-S. Precarious means it is at the edge. So precarious was the position of my hero and my heroine that my first impulse, I-M-P-U-L-S-E, impulse means instinct, immediately what you want to do was to stop and buy something, since the man had been caught. I made some small purchases and a conversation began about Abdul Rahman, the Russians, the English, and the frontier policy. So that was general knowledge. As I was about to leave, he asked, "And where is the little girl, sir?" And I, thinking that Minnie must get rid of her false fear, had her brought out. She stood by my chair and looked at the Kabulliwala and his bag. He offered her nuts and raisins, but she would not be tempted, and only clung, C-L-U-N-G, hold fast, strongly, clung the closer to me with all her doubts increased. This was their first meeting. One morning, however, not many days later, as I was leaving the house, I was startled. S-T-A-R-T-L-E-D. Startled means surprised. Shock. To find Minnie seated on a bench near the door, laughing and talking with a great Kabulliwala at her feet. In all her life, it appeared, my small daughter had never found so patient a listener. Save her father. Save her father means here it means accept her father. And already the corner of her little sari is a dress in India, was stuffed, S-T-U-F-F-E-D. Stuffed means packed with, S-T-U-F-F-E-D, with almonds and raisins, the gift of her visitor. So Kabulliwala had gifted her that. "Why did you give her those?" I said, and taking out an 8-anna bit, I handed it to him. The man accepted the money without demur, D-E-M-U-R, which means without saying anything, and slipped it into his pocket. Alas, on my return an hour later, I found the unfortunate coin had made twice its own worth of trouble. Which means it made trouble. For the Kabulliwala had given it to Minnie, and her mother, catching sight of the bright round object, had pounced on her child with, "Where did you get that 8-anna bit?" Pounced, P-O-U-N-C, this means you climb on to somebody, like the tiger pounced on somebody. So we'll be doing all these words in the next video. A full study. "The Kabulliwala gave it to me," said Minnie cheerfully. "The Kabulliwala gave it to you?" cried her mother, much shocked. "Oh, Minnie, how could you take it from him?" I, entering at the moment, saved her from impending disaster. Impending, sure to come. Impending, I-M-P-E-N-D-I-N-G. Impending. You can stop the video and even write it down, these words. They're beautiful words. I, entering at the moment, saved her from impending disaster and proceeded to make my own inquiries. It was not the first or second time I found that the two had met. The Kabulliwala had overcome the child's first terror. Overcome means he overcame it. Like you overcome the stress means you conquer it. The child's first terror by a judicious bribery. Judicious. J-U-D-I-S-I-O-U-S means careful and caution, with intelligence. And bribery, bribing somebody. Yeah, giving money or things. Bribery of nuts and almonds, and the two were now great friends. They had many quaint jokes. Quaint means very queer, and strange jokes, which afforded them much amusement. Gave them much amusement. A-M-U-S-E-M-E-N-T, amusement, entertainment. Seated in front of him, looking down on his gigantic frame, G-I-G-A-N-T-I-C, gigantic frame, in all her tiny dignity, Tiny dignity. Minnie would ripple her face with laughter and begin. Ripple. You know the water ripples? Her face is always full of expression. Ripple her face with laughter and begin. Oh, Kabulliwala, Kabulliwala, what have you got in your bag? And he would reply in the nasal accents. Nasal. You know the nose, from the nose, that kind of a sound which comes from the nose. In the nasal accents of the mountaineer. Mountaineer. People who live on hills and climb hills or mountains. An elephant, he said. He gave an answer. What have you got in your bag? An elephant. Not much cause for merriment, perhaps, but how they both enjoyed the fun. And for me, the child's talk with the grown-up man had always in it something strangely fascinating. He found it fascinating, this author, the father. Fascinating. Fascinating. Then the Kabulliwala, not to be fascinating means wonderful. A thing to see which is so impressive. Fascinating. Then the Kabulliwala, not to be behindhand, would take his turn. Well, little one, and when are you going to the father-in-law's house? Father-in-law's house. Now, most small Bengali maidens. Bengali is Bengal. Is a state in India. Bengali maidens, women, have heard long ago about the father-in-law's house, but we, being a little newfangled, which means new-fashioned, modern, had kept these things from our child, and Minnie at this question must have been a trifle bewildered. Trifle means little, bewildered. It's a very beautiful word, bewildered. Bewildered means surprised, strange expression. But she would not show it, and with ready tact, T-A-C-T, tact, which means, tact means intelligence of how to reply in certain situations. Ready tact replied, Are you going there? So Minnie asks Kabulliwala, are you going there? Amongst men of the Kabulliwala's class, however, it is well known that the words father-in-law actually has a double meaning. It is a euphemism, E-U-P-H-E-M-I-S-M, which means the other meaning. Euphemism is a cover, a word which has actually another deeper meaning, hidden meaning. Euphemism for jail. So instead of saying jail, they call it father-in-law in the Kabulliwala's language. The place where we are well cared for at no expense to ourselves. In the jail. In this sense, would the sturdy peddler take my daughter's question? He would say, shaking his fist at an invisible policeman. I will thrash my father-in-law. Hearing this and picturing the poor discomfited, D-I-S-C-O-M-F-I-T-E-D, discomfited means made uncomfortable. Discomfited relative, Minnie would go off into peals of laughter, P-E-A-L-S, peals of laughter, lots of laughter, in which her formidable friend would join. Formidable, F-O-R-M-I-D-A-L-E, D-A-B-L-E, formidable. Formidable means a huge guy, strong. Formidable friend would join. These were autumn mornings, the very time of year when kings of old went forth to conquest, and I, never stirring is moving, S-T-I-R-R-I-G, from a little corner in Calcutta, would let my mind wander over the whole world. At the very name of a foreigner in the streets, I would fall to weaving a network of dreams, the mountains, the glens, and the forests of those distant homes, with his cottage in its setting, and the free and independent life of faraway wilds. He's imagining the life of the Kabulliwala. Perhaps the scenes of travel conjure. C-O-N-J-U-R-E. Conjure means bring in the imagination. Conjure themselves up before me and pass and repass in my imagination all the more vividly, sharply. Vividly is sharply. V-I-V-I-D-L-E. Because I lead such a vegetable existence. Vegetable existence, like a tree, only in one place. That to call to travel would fall upon me like a thunderbolt. So travel is always very romantic. In the presence of this Kabulliwala, I was immediately transported, taken there to the foot of and mountain peaks with narrow little defiles twisting in and out amongst their towering heights. Towering heights means very tall. Towering is very tall. Towering heights. I would see the string of camels bearing the merchandise, the things, and the company of turbaned merchants carrying some very queer old firearms and some their spears journeying downward towards the plains. I could see, but at some such point, Minnie's mother would intervene, which means come in between, intervene, intervene, imploring me to beware of that man. She's very frightened of the Kabullywala. Imploring is begging. Intervening, imploring, two words here. Minnie's mother is unfortunately a very timid lady. Timid is very meek, very cowardly, very frightened. Whenever she hears a noise in the street or sees people coming towards the house, she always jumps to the conclusion, means quickly coming to a conclusion that they are either thieves or drunkards or snakes or tigers or malaria or cockroaches or caterpillars. Even after all these years of experience, she is not able to overcome her terror. Overcome has come again, her terror. So she was full of doubts about the Kabullywala and used to beg me to keep a watchful eye on him. I tried to laugh her fear gently away. Gently away. Gently. Don't worry and nothing will happen. But then she would turn round on me seriously and ask me solemn questions. Serious questions. Solemn. S-O-L-E-M-N. Solemn is very serious questions. Were children never kidnapped? Was it then not true that there was slavery in Kabul? Was it so very absurd, crazy, that absurd, that this big man should be able to carry off a tiny child? I urged, stressed, urged means begged, stressed, that though not impossible, it was highly improbable. The probability of that is very less. Improbable. That's also another good word, improbable. But this was not enough, and her dread persisted. Her fear, dread is fear, persisted, remained. As it was indefinite, however, it did not seem right to forbid. Stop. Forbid means stop. Forbid. F-O-R-B-I-D. The man, the house, and the intimacy went on unchecked. Intimacy is closeness. Once a year in the middle of January, Rahmoon the Kabullywala was in the habit of returning to his country, and as the time approached, he would be very busy, going from house to house, collecting his debts. This year, however, he could always find time to come and see Minnie. It would have seemed to an outsider that there was some conspiracy between the two. Conspiracy, secret plan, between the two. For when he could not come in the morning, he would appear in the evening. So he had developed a very close friendship with Minnie. Even to me, it was a little strange. Startling. S-T-A-R-T-L-I-N-G. Strange. Now and then, in the corner of a dark room, suddenly to surprise this tall, loose-garmented, much haggled man. But when Minnie would run in smiling with her, "Oh, Kabullywala," and the two friends, so far apart in age, would subside, S-U-B-S-I-D, again go back into their old laughter and their old jokes, I felt reassured, which means you are comfortable, you are comforted that nothing will happen. Reassured is comforted that nothing will happen. One morning, a few days before, he had made up his mind. Decided to go. I was correcting my proof sheets in my study. It was chilly weather, very cold. Through the window, the rays of the sun touched my feet, and the slight warmth was very welcome. It was almost 8 o'clock, and the early pedestrians are people who walk on the road, were returning home with their heads covered. All at once, I heard an uproar in the street, and looking out, saw Rahmoon being led away. Uproar is big noise. Led away, taken away, bound between two policemen, and behind them a crowd of curious boys who were curious. There were blood stains on the clothes of the Kabullywala, and one of the policemen carried a knife. Hurrying out, I stopped them and inquired what it all meant. Partly from another, I gathered that a certain neighbor had owed the peddler something for a Rampuri shawl. Rampuri is a type of shawl, and had falsely denied having bought it. And then in the course of the quarrel, Rahmoon had struck him. had struck him, struck, struck him. Now, in the heat of the excitement, the prisoner began calling his enemy all sorts of names when suddenly in the veranda at my home appeared my little Minnie with her usual exclamation, "Oh, Kabulliwala, Kabulliwala!" Ramun's face lighted up. Light came on his face. As he turned to her, he had no bag under his arm today, so she could not discuss the elephant with him. She at once, therefore, proceeded to the next question. "Are you going to your father-in-law's house?" Ramun laughed and said, "Just where I am going, little one." Then, seeing that the reply did not amuse the child, he held up his fettered hands. Fettered, Fettered. Fettered means chained. Fettered hands. "Ah," he said, "I would have thrashed that old father-in-law, but my hands are bound." Bound means chained. Thrashed, Thrashed. I'd have beaten him on a charge of murderous assault. On a charge of murderous assault, which means striking. Attack. Assault is attack. ASSAULT. Rahman was sentenced to some years' imprisonment. Sentenced. SENTENCED. Sentence means put in jail. The other meaning of sentenced. Time passed away and he was not remembered. The accustomed work in the accustomed place was ours, and the thought of the once free mountaineer spending his years in prison seldom or never occurred to us. Even my light-hearted Minnie, I'm ashamed to say, forgot her old friend. New companions filled her life. As she grew older, she spent more of her time with girls. So much time indeed did she spend with them that she came no more as she used to do to her father's room. I was scarcely on speaking terms with her. Years had passed now. Years had passed away. It was once more autumn and we had made arrangements for our Minnie's marriage. It was to take place during the puja holidays. With Durga returning to Kailas, the light of our home also was to depart. The light of our home is Minnie only, the daughter, was also to depart, DEPART, which is go away, depart to her husband's house and leave her father's house in the shadow. The morning was bright. After the rains, there was a sense of ablution, cleaning. Ablution is cleaning, having a bath and all that, in the air. And the sun rays looked like pure gold. So bright were they that they gave a beautiful radiance even to the sordid brick walls of our Calcutta lanes. Sordid means dirty, SORDID. Since early dawn that day, the wedding pipes had been sounding, and at each beat, my own heart throbbed. THROBBED, his heart, because he was a father and his daughter was going away tonight. The wail of the tune, wail, which means cry, WAIL is cry, moan. The wail of the tune, Bhairavi, Raga, seemed to intensify my pain at the approaching separation. My Minnie was to be married that night. From early morning noise and bustle had pervaded. From early morning, noise and bustle, BUSTLE, which means a lot of noise here and there, people going, coming and all. That's called noise and bustle, had pervaded, PERVADED. Pervaded means surrounded, completely surrounded the house. In the courtyard, a canopy had to be slung on its bamboo poles. The chandeliers with the tinkling sound must be hung in each room and veranda. There was no end of hurry and excitement. I was sitting in my study looking through the accounts when someone entered. Saluting, giving a salute respectfully, and stood before me. It was Rahman, the Kabulliwala. At first I did not recognize him. He had no bag, nor the long hair, nor the same vigor. Vigor means strength that he used to have, but he smiled and I knew him again. "When did you come, Rahman?" I asked him. "Last evening," he said. "I was released from jail." The words struck harsh upon my ears. The words struck harsh, HARSH. The words struck harsh upon my ears. Harsh means very strong, very, very painful. I had never before talked with one who had wounded his fellow, and my heart shrank within itself when I realized this, for I felt that the day would have been better omened, OMENED, good omens they say, right? good omen, better omened had he not turned up. Turned up means come. Turned up means come. It's a phrasal verb. Turned up means come. There are ceremonies going on, I said, and I'm busy. Could you please perhaps come on another day? At once he turned to go, but as he reached the door, he hesitated and said, May I not see the little one, sir, for a moment? It was his belief that Minnie was still the same. It was his belief that Minnie was still the same. He had pictured her running to him as she used to, calling, "Oh, Kabulliwala, Kabulliwala." He had imagined too that they would laugh and talk together, just as of old times. In fact, in memory of former days, he had brought, carefully wrapped up in paper, a few almonds and raisins and grapes, obtained somehow from the countryman, for his own little fund was dispersed. Dispersed means gone. Distributed. Dispersed is distributed. I said again, there is a ceremony in the house and you will not be able to see anyone today. The man's face fell. The man's face fell. Face falling means becoming sad. He looked wistfully. Wistfull. Something you want and can't get. Something you desire and you can't get. Wistfully. The man's face fell. He looked wistfully at me for a moment, then said, "Good morning," and went out. I felt a little sorry and would have called him back, but I found he was returning on his own accord. He came close up to me, holding out his offerings with the words. He gave the offerings, all the grapes and sweets. "I brought these few things, sir, for the little one. Will you give them to her?" I took them and was going to pay him, but he caught my hand and said, "You are very kind, sir. Keep me in your recollection. Do not offer me money. You have a little girl. I too have one, little like her, in my own home. I think of her and bring fruits to your child, not to make a profit for myself, sir." Very beautiful words. Saying this, he put his hand inside his big, loose robe and brought out a small and dirty piece of paper. With great care, he unfolded this paper and smoothed it, made it smooth it out with both hands on my table. It bore the impression of a little hand, not a photograph, not a drawing. The impression of an ink-smeared hand had laid flat on the paper. The touch of his own little daughter had been always on his heart, as he had come year after year to Calcutta to sell his wares. wares, wares means things you sell in the streets. Then tears came into my eyes. I forgot that he was a poor Kabulliwala, poor fruit seller, while I was, what was I? No, what was I? More than he. He was also a father. That impression of the hand of his little girl in her distant mountain home reminded me of my own little Minnie. I sent for Minnie immediately from the inner chambers. Many difficulties were raised. They didn't want to send Minnie outside, but I would not listen. Clad means CLAD. Clad means dressed in the red silk of her wedding day, with the sandal paste on her forehead, and adorned as a young bride. Adorned means dressed up as a young bride. Minnie came and stood bashfully before me. Bashfully means shyly. Bashfully is shy, shyness. The Kabulliwala looked a little staggered, staggered, at the apparition. These two words you must understand here. The Kabulliwala looked a little staggered, means completely shaken. Staggered means shaken at the apparition. It was like an illusion. He could not revive. Remember, revive is bring back their old friendship. At last he smiled and said, "Little one, are you going to your father-in-law's house?" But Minnie now understood the meaning of the word father-in-law, and she could not reply to him as of old. She flushed up at the question. Again she felt flushed up means Her face became red out of shyness and stood before him with her bride-like face turned down. I remembered the day when the CABULLIWALA and my Mini had first met, and I felt sad. When she had gone, Rahmoon heaved a deep sigh. Heaved. Like you say, right? You take a deep breath. That's heaved, a deep sigh. S-I-G-H. Sigh means that feeling, and sat down on the floor. The idea had suddenly come to him that his daughter too must have grown in this long time, and that he would also have to make friends with his own daughter again. Of course, he would not find her as he used to know her, and besides, what might not have happened to her in these 8 years? The marriage pipes sounded. The mild autumn sun streamed around us, went around the sun, the light. But Rahmoon sat in the little Calcutta lane and saw before him the barren mountains of Afghanistan. Barren. Nothing is there. I took out a banknote, which means a lot of money, and gave it to him, saying, "Go back to your own daughter, Rahmoon, in your own country. May the happiness of your meeting your own daughter bring good fortune to my child." Having made this present, I had to curtail, curtail. Curtail means bring down, curtail some of the festivities. Festivities means that which you spend on a marriage or a wedding day. Having made this present, I had to curtail, bring down some of the festivities, what you spend on weddings. I could not have the electric lights I had intended, not the military band, and the ladies of the house were despondent, which was sad at it. And the ladies of the house were despondent at it. But to me, the wedding feast was all the brighter for the thought that in a distant land, a long lost father met again with his only child. And that's such a heart-touching story. That's how it ends. This is Rabindranath Tagore. This is the sensitivity in which great writers go deep into the soul of a human being and talk about the real core feelings. Thank you so much for listening to this beautiful story. Every time I share this story, it brings tears to my eyes. Thank you.